The archaeological team stood frozen at the edge of the ancient ruins, their scanning equipment crackling with interference. The Vaxian structures had been dead for 3,000 years, silent monuments to a civilization that had simply vanished overnight. But now something was different. Something was wrong. "Did anyone else hear that?" Lieutenant Chen whispered, her translator device flickering uncertainly. The rest of the survey team nodded slowly, their faces pale behind their helmet visors. A sound had emerged from deep within the collapsed temple complex. Not quite words, not quite music, but something that made their bones vibrate and their teeth ache. The alien syllables seemed to bypass their ears entirely and speak directly into their minds. All of them heard it. All of them felt the primal urge to run. All except Corporal James, Honey Badger Morrison. Morrison had earned his nickname during the colony wars on Kepler 442b, where he'd crawled through a nest of acid-spitting tunnel serpents to rescue his entire squad. Before that, he'd survived a hull breach by sealing the leak with his own arm while everyone else panicked. The Marines had started calling him Honey Badger because, like the Earth animal, Morrison simply didn't care about danger. He didn't freeze. He didn't run. He just kept going forward. Now, while the others backed away from the ruins, Morrison took a step closer. "Morrison, wait!" Captain Rodriguez's voice cracked through the comm. "We need to assess the situation first. Whatever's making that sound could be hostile." Morrison's scarred face split into a grin behind his helmet. "Only one way to find out." "Captain?" The voice grew louder, more insistent. It formed patterns that almost made sense, like hearing your name called in a crowded room. The survey team's AI translator struggled to parse the meaning, throwing up error messages and fragmentary warnings. "Danger. Approach not. Sacred ground. Death waits." "Stand down, Corporal, that's an order," Rodriguez said, but there was uncertainty in his tone. Everyone knew Morrison's record. The man had been recommended for a dozen medals and twice as many court-martials. He got results, but he didn't follow protocols. Morrison checked his plasma rifle and started walking toward the ruins. "Sorry, Captain. Signal's breaking up. Can't hear you." He switched off his comm before Rodriguez could respond. The ruins loomed before him. Massive stone blocks covered in crystalline growths that pulsed with faint inner light. The Vaxians had been master builders, creating structures that defied human understanding of physics and architecture. Their temples seemed to exist in more dimensions than the standard 3, with corridors that bent in impossible directions and rooms that were bigger on the inside than the outside. The voice called again, and Morrison felt it pull at something deep in his chest. Most humans would describe it as terrifying. Morrison just found it interesting. He climbed over a collapsed archway, his boots crunching on gravel and broken crystal. The air inside the ruins was cooler, and it smelled like ozone after a thunderstorm. His helmet's sensors showed elevated radiation levels, electromagnetic anomalies, and traces of exotic matter that shouldn't exist in normal space. "Yeah, definitely something weird going on here," Morrison muttered to himself. He descended deeper into the complex, following the sound. The walls around him began to glow brighter, responding to his presence. Ancient Vaxian symbols appeared in the stone, forming and reforming in patterns that hurt to look at directly. His helmet's camera recorded everything, sending encrypted data back to the ship in orbit. The voice shifted, becoming clearer. Morrison could almost make out words now, though they weren't in any language he knew. The translation software finally managed to grab hold of something. "Guardian, Ancient One, the sleeper wakes." Morrison entered a vast chamber that should have been impossible, given the size of the ruins from outside. It stretched hundreds of meters in every direction, with a domed ceiling that seemed to show stars from an unfamiliar sky. At the center of the room stood a crystalline structure, the size of a small building, pulsing with inner light. The voice came from inside the crystal. Every instinct Morrison had ever developed in 20 years of military service told him this was a trap. Every regulation and protocol screamed at him to withdraw and call for backup. But Morrison had never listened to instincts or regulations before, and he wasn't about to start now. He approached the crystal structure, his rifle ready but not raised. Aggression would be pointless against something this big and clearly powerful. Instead, he kept his body language neutral, the way he would approach any unknown situation. "Hello?" Morrison called out. "I'm Corporal James Morrison, United Earth Survey Corps. Are you injured? Do you need assistance?" The voice stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was more unnerving than the sound had been. Then the crystal began to crack. Morrison didn't run. He planted his feet and raised his rifle, ready for whatever emerged. The cracks spread like spider webs across the surface, glowing with brilliant white light. Fragments began to fall away, and Morrison saw something moving inside. It wasn't a Vaxian. It wasn't anything in the known database of alien species. The creature that emerged stood 3 meters tall, with a body that seemed to be made of liquid metal and crystallized thought. It had too many limbs, arranged in configurations that shifted as Morrison watched. Its face, if it could be called that, was a swirling mass of geometric patterns that constantly rearranged themselves. "You came," the being said, and this time Morrison's translator worked perfectly. Of all the species in the galaxy, only humans would hear a warning as an invitation. Morrison lowered his rifle slightly. "You were trying to warn people away. For 3,000 years. The being's form solidified somewhat, becoming more humanoid in shape, as if adapting to Morrison's expectations. "I was sealed here as punishment by my people. My crime was seeking knowledge that should not be known. The warning was clear. Death awaits those who approach." "Yeah, I heard that part," Morrison said. "But you didn't sound dangerous. You sounded lonely." The being paused, its geometric face freezing mid-shift. "Lonely, yes. 3 millennia of isolation while consciousness remains intact. The Vaxians built well, too well." Morrison slung his rifle over his shoulder. "So you're not here to destroy the galaxy or unleash some ancient evil?" "I am a scholar and a scientist. My people feared my research into dimensional mechanics would unravel reality itself. Perhaps they were right to be cautious, but their solution was to imprison me rather than help me refine my work." The being gestured around the chamber. "This entire complex is a prison designed to hold me until the heat death of the universe. No species we encountered had the courage to ignore the warnings and investigate. Until now." "The Vaxians disappeared 3,000 years ago," Morrison said. "Your people are gone." "I know. I felt their passing through the dimensional barriers. A plague, I think. Possibly caused by their own dabbling in forces they did not understand. The irony does not escape me." Morrison walked closer, studying the being with interest rather than fear. "My people have a saying. Fortune favors the bold. We also have a lot of sayings about how curiosity killed the cat, but we tend to ignore those ones. You are either very brave or very foolish, Corporal Morrison. I prefer to think I'm practical. You've been locked up for 3,000 years for a crime that your people's own extinction suggests might not have been as dangerous as they thought. Seems like you've served your time." The being's form rippled with something that might have been laughter. "You would release me?" "I'd need to talk to my superiors first, get some lawyers involved, probably. But yeah, I don't see why not." Morrison grinned. "Besides, humans are always looking for new scientific partnerships. You've got 3,000 years of isolation to catch up on, and we've got a whole lot of questions about dimensional mechanics." The being was silent for a long moment. "Your species is unique, Corporal. Every other race we encountered would have either destroyed this place or fled from it. Only humans would hear an ancient warning, march straight toward danger, and then try to negotiate a job interview. Is that a yes? That is a we shall see. But for the first time in 3,000 years, I have hope. Morrison's comm suddenly crackled back to life. Captain Rodriguez's voice was frantic. Morrison, respond! We're detecting massive energy spikes from your location. Are you under attack? Morrison glanced at the being, who had settled into a vaguely humanoid form that still managed to look distinctly alien. Nah, Captain. Everything's fine. Just made first contact with the imprisoned dimensional scientist who's been waiting 3,000 years for someone crazy enough to say hello. Probably going to need an exolinguist and a lawyer down here. There was a long pause on the other end. Morrison, did you just negotiate a first contact situation without authorization? Pretty much. Another pause. Damn it, Morrison. This is going in your file. Yes, sir. But in the metal column this time, right? Captain Rodriguez sighed. We'll see. Stay there. I'm sending the team down. Morrison looked at the ancient being before him. Welcome to the 26th century. You're going to find it weird, but probably not as weird as having a human as your first visitor. The being's geometric face formed something that might have been a smile. I suspect you are correct, honey badger. Morrison raised an eyebrow. You know about honey badgers? Your species' data networks are quite accessible to beings of my nature. I have spent the last 10 minutes learning everything I can about humanity. Fascinating creatures. Individually fragile, yet collectively unstoppable. You charge toward danger that wiser species flee from. You help those you have no obligation to help. You see prisons and think of pardons. You are either the galaxy's greatest heroes or its most magnificent fools. Morrison laughed. Why not both? And in that moment, as the survey team descended into the ruins and humanity took its first steps toward understanding dimensional mechanics, Corporal James Honey Badger Morrison proved once again why humans had earned their reputation across the stars. They didn't run from the unknown. They ran toward it, armed with curiosity, compassion, and a complete disregard for sensible self-preservation. The galaxy would never be the same.